Chobe! About 1 million people were shouting, yeah! Chobe! Yeah! Chobe! Yeah. And Nkrumah was very good at speaking extempore. So he said, at long last, the battle is ended. At Ghana, your beloved country is free forever. You should hear the yes. Oh, people could hear. I think they heard it in Gomena.
We are still celebrating Ghana here on GhanaWeb TV. This is People and Places, and I am your host, Partey Narh. Today, I sit with another senior citizen who will be sharing with us his experiences pre-independence and post-independence. My guest for today is Mr. Cameron Duodu. So you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us. It's an honor to meet you in person.
It's a great pleasure to be here and to talk to you.
Yes. Let's go right into the conversation. You are more experienced in the media work. Did you want to become a journalist growing up?
No, I didn't know what I was going to be when I was in school, but I knew that I could write good essays. My teachers were always saying that my command of the English language was good, and I usually got very good or quite good marks when they were marking my papers in English. So I had that self-confidence that at least I could express myself. And then when we were in school, in those days they used standards. I was in standard 2 when I got a teacher who was very bright. He had just come back from teacher training college. And he was also an ardent Nkrumahist. And he told us that the British were cheating us. They had said that they would leave the country after 100 years. And they signed a treaty in 1844. So they should have left in 1944, and they didn't leave. So Nkrumah had come, and he was going to make sure that they left. And these people, he and another teacher, young teacher, they didn't part their hair like the old teachers.
Okay.
You know how Nkrumah's face was round, and they all did that. And every time they would go and bring a copy of the evening news, which was Nkrumah's paper, and tell us what was going on. So I became politicized very early. In 1947, I was only 12 years old. But I understood,
the politics
what was it. And then in 1948, when people went on strike and the British arrested them, including Nkrumah, Dankwa, and all the others, Akufo-Addo's father was one of them, they were detained. And this teacher used to come to class and tell us that it was Nkrumah who was an enzima and therefore had witchcraft, who was tasting the food that the British brought to them, and if the cat saw that there was poison in any of it, it would make the food fall down and they wouldn't eat it. That's why they survived. So he built Nkrumah up in our eyes, and we all loved him.
So that's your journey into the media space. And you've been there, you spent a huge part of your life in that industry.
Yes, it was, well, I was a people teacher, and I was encouraged to do a correspondence course to obtain the certificate I couldn't get because I hadn't gone to secondary school. And I did it in 15 months, and that gave me even more confidence to study And to read, I used to read a lot. And after I left Standard 7 in those days, I used to read a lot, and I saw a magazine called New Nation. It had just been published in Accra, and I liked what was in it. So I wrote to them and asked them whether they would welcome some articles from me. And they said yes. My first article was published. When I saw my name there by camera Duodu, I was so happy. And I followed up by writing for Radio Ghana.
Okay.
And they too accepted my stuff. And I became quite famous, you know, very young. Every time they read a story of mine, they would say, the very young writer, Cameron Duodu. So I became very self-confident. And eventually I even left New Nation and went to Ghana Broadcasting Corporation.
Okay, that was in which year?
1957.
57.
Yeah,
okay.
the same
the
year.
year Ghana gained.
Yes.
Okay.
And it was there whilst I was working that we had just started Radio Ghana as an international broadcasting organization.
Okay.
Because as you remember, Nkrumah on the night of independence said, the independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked up with the total liberation of the entire African continent. So he helped us to establish an international station. And we were broadcasting to the whole of Africa and the world.
Share with us some of the working experience pre-independence. You were in the media, so you go about reporting on issues about the country. Share with us some of the experiences of the time. How was life like?
Between 1954 and 1957, the country was very, very restive. The Ashanti people wanted to have their own country, and the rest of the country was saying no. So there was a sharp division in the country. The Ashanti movement was called the National Liberation Movement, and they realized that the Convention People's Party, Nkrumah's party, would monopolize power if we got independence. So they wanted to put balances in place to prevent them.
Nkrumah at the time.
Yes. And one of the things that they fought against most was the cocoa price. You know, Ashanti is a huge cocoa producing area, and some of the Asian region too.
That's what we are.
And they didn't want Nkrumah to be able to grab all the revenue from the cocoa, because then he could use it to do whatever he wanted to do. So there was tension, major tension. Some people even lost their lives
as a result
of the tension, yes, and the opposition. But after independence, I think it died down a bit. But Nkrumah wanted revenge.
Okay.
And so 1 year after independence, he brought an act of parliament that enabled him to detain people without trial. Now, because we had a British system, you could never be arrested without being taken to court.
Yeah.
They arrest you, they take you to court, you can be bailed, then you are put in the dock, they ask you questions whether you are guilty or not, be decided not by politicians, but by trained magistrates and judges. But the Preventive Detention Act stopped all that. They look at you and say, we heard that you had said that Osidoku should not become part of Nkrumah. Why did you say that? They wouldn't even ask you.
And then they arrest
if it is against their policy, you go inside 5 years without trial. So that was the major setback that the country suffered after independence, that in spite of constitutional guarantees that we should have freedom of the individual, they had the power to do this kind of thing. But at the same time, people were neglecting this anomaly because Nkrumah was doing very well with industrialization.
Yeah.
They established, for instance, laundries in Accra. That was the first time there had been laundries in Accra. You know, you finish work, you take your stuff there. The next morning you could go and collect it and pay.
Do you recall some of the locations where these laundry services?
Laundry, I remember very much because it was at Graphic Road.
Okay.
And as you know, the Daily Graphic was the biggest newspaper in the country at the time. And the Industrial Holding Corporation, they had so many industries and so on. So whilst the country was being built up to make up for the neglect that the British had left us with, not being industrialized, just being producers of cocoa, timber, and unprocessed raw materials, they began gradually to try and industrialize. But then we were so unlucky that the political situation got worse and worse and worse.
Each year.
Yeah. In 1957, we had about over 30 MPs who were not from the Convention People's Party. By the end of 1958, about half of them were in jail. None of them had been taken to court. And that
by the same Preventive
Detention Act, yes. And because of that, people in the opposition began to make friends with army officers. General Ankra, Lieutenant General Kwesi Afrifa, General Ike Kutuka, and so on. They, you know, the soldiers were in town, and people made approaches to them and said, if you don't take care, he will take you to Rhodesia to go and fight the white people there, and you will all die.
That was the story they were telling.
Yes.
Okay.
And because there was so little freedom of speech, rumors began to be accepted as fact. And none of these things were true. But when people don't like you because of what you are doing, they will believe anything about you that people say. So that was also a major constraint about our political development.
Okay, now let's look at the evening Nkrumah announced independence. You were a young reporter at the time.
Yes.
At what age?
20 years old.
20 years old.
Yes. So I went to Parliament House and they made speeches welcoming independence. Nkrumah spoke, Dr. Busia, who was the opposition leader, spoke, and then we all trooped to the Polo Ground, which was opposite Parliament House in those days. And because I had my press card around my neck, I was able to pass through with the politicians.
Okay.
And got very close to the days. And on the days, you had all the people who had been to prison during the independence struggle. Welbeck, Kroboduse, Kojo Botso, Komlagbedema, Kesleyford, Archie Kesleyford. They were all there. And there was something called PG, Prison Graduate, a special cap that they had manufactured.
Okay.
And they were all standing there. And the post office siren in Accra began to beat exactly on the dot when midnight struck.
Okay.
And you hear, whip, whip, whip. And after it had stopped, Nkrumah told Kroboduse, "Bepae mame, come and shout for me," because he had been speaking in Parliament and his voice was a bit. And Kroboduse, you should have seen him. Very, very strong voice. Choboy! About 1 million people were shouting, "Yeah! Choboy! Yeah! Choboy!" Yeah. And Nkrumah was very good at speaking extempore. So he said, at long last, the battle is ended. And Ghana, your beloved country, is free forever. You should hear the yes. Oh, people could hear. I think they heard it in Gomenya.
It was a massive crowd then.
Absolutely. Almost everybody in Accra was there who could go, you know. Because in those days, Accra wasn't that big.
Like we have to.
Yes. So people just convert. And then he said, we are going to build an African personality and show the world that the black man can manage his own affairs. And people were happy to hear that, because why should somebody come from his place far away, England, and come and rule you?
Yeah.
You have your own customs, you have your own way of doing things, and somebody comes and says, no, those are not good. You do this, you do that. So people were happy. I walked from the polo ground in Accra to Christiansborg after the speech, and I didn't even realize I was walking. Of course, there were a lot of people who were going, and I was so excited.
All right, it's an interesting conversation we are having with Mr. Cameron Duodu. I'll take a quick break. I'll be right back.
Sweetheart, be mindful of your health. Idea products na the makeup. I welcome you to Sigma Health and Beauty. You can call us the Beauty Embassy. Who pursue beauty more revealed with quality makeup products. There is only one place. The Sigma Health and Beauty 2022 Ghana Makeup Awards. Beauty Retail Business of the Year. Of course, we are the defending champions. World-class makeup brands and on you name it. Maybelline, Dark and Lovely, House of Tara, and many more. Your professionalism in the beauty industry is unmatchable. Ensure the proper way of applying our products. Sigma Health and Beauty, Yewa Accra, Makola, Georgina Stores, and Rollins Park, Gate 4. Fryer 0248 138 596 and 0201 408 186. Or visit our online shop at www.beautyavenuegh.com. Sigma, your beauty, our joy.
You are still watching People and Places here on GhanaWeb TV. With me, Partey Narh, and my guest is Mr. Cameron Duodu. So before we went for the break, we were talking about the eve of independence of Ghana. Then Nkrumah became the Prime Minister. You were a media person. What description can you give to Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah?
As I have already said, because of the exposure that we were given about him by our teachers.
Okay.
I was excited to be in Accra working in the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation, which Nkrumah had set up. And because he wanted to fulfill his promise that the whole of Africa should become independent, he paid a lot of attention to what we said about Africa. And in fact, in 1958, he called two conferences, a conference of independent African states, and then followed it up by a conference of all African peoples. And this included African countries whose people were not yet free.
Okay.
French colonial rule, Belgian colonial rule in the Congo, and Portuguese colonial rule in Angola, Mozambique, and Guinea-Bissau. And the most important part of it was that the Congo, which was a very rich country, and one which everybody wanted to control because the first atomic bombs that were made by the Americans got the uranium from the Congo. Okay. So they wanted to continue to be there. And Nkrumah realized that if the Congo stayed with the West, we would never really be free. So he wanted the Congo to succeed. And he had a very brilliant orator like himself called Patrice Lumumba as the prime minister. So after independence, the Belgians wanted to stay, and they made all sorts of attempts to remove this Lumumba from power. And Nkrumah tried to prevent this. Now, Lumumba was overthrown by a conglomeration of allies, the United States, Belgium, and the West. They overthrew him. And at that time, Ghana had sent troops to the Congo, but they were under the United Nations.
Okay.
So we couldn't directly intervene to save Lumumba, but we were doing our best. And once this was going on, I had become an editor after 1 year at the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation, the news section. We heard directly from Radio Leopoldville, as it was called at that time, that the Congolese government that had overthrown Lumumba had arrested the Ghana ambassador and told him to leave the country. This news reached me on my desk, and I said, no, I cannot broadcast this, because if people whose relatives are in the Ghana have been serving in the Congo, we had electricians, we had bricklayers, all sorts of people had gone there to help them. If they hear that our ambassador had been asked to leave, they will panic. So I sent the news item directly to Flagstaff House, Nkrumah's office. I said, this is what we have heard from Radio Leopoldville. Within 15 minutes, the car was downstairs at Broadcasting House. Who is Cameron Duodu? I said, me. I said, please come with me. I was
What was going through your mind?
Huh?
What was going through your mind?
I thought I was finished. Sure. Kwame Nkrumah in those days. People feared him. So I thought I was finished. So they took me there, sat there. And whilst I was sitting there waiting for him, the man was very crafty. He had a little hole in his office from which he could watch my demeanor to see whether I was panicking or not, to see my state of mind. Anyway, eventually I was good before him. And said, are you so-and-so? I said, yes, sir. Why did you send this news to this office? I said, sir, we have soldiers in the Congo. We have artisans in the Congo. And if they hear that your ambassador, who would look after them, has been expelled, they will panic. And their relatives here too will panic. But today is Sunday. And I know that although the Ghana Army has communications with the Congo, they might not bring you this news so quickly because they won't understand its significance. But I am your editor, and I thought that you should be the first to know so that you could react before a crisis began. And he looked at me. He couldn't say anything. No? What he said was, all right, but this is not a news agency, so don't bring news here. I laughed my head off.
Did his overthrow come as a surprise to you?
No,
It didn't.
because the feeling of repression was too much in the country. Ghanaians love their freedom, as you know. And to be arrested and put in jail for 5 years without anybody asking you what you had done, whether you have any defense, and for independent people to look at your case, and if you were guilty, find you guilty. If you were not guilty, let you go. This was against our natural justice. So I knew that if you continued along that path, the people would begin to dislike him and his policies. And it was sad because, as I said before, the industrialization program was going on, things were improving, and we were respected. Ghana was respected everywhere you went. I went to the Soviet Union in 1958 when I was only 21 years of age. And from there I went to Kenya, Uganda, even to Southern Rhodesia in those days, which was a racist country. The only place I couldn't go to was South Africa because when I wrote it didn't mind me at all.
Yeah.
Yes. So it was sad, but especially when Dr. J.B. Dankwa, who was one of the big six
yeah.
with Nkrumah, they had been arrested together and taken to the north of Ghana by the British without trial, and he was put in jail without trial. He died in prison. A major political figure of that type. When he died in prison, I knew that Nkrumah too was finished. And in fact, that was the time that people began to really seriously think of overthrowing him. So I'm sorry, but he asked for it.
It was expected. Now, as someone who have been around for such a time, in Nkrumah school, and then the subsequent schools, were they necessary?
The point is, the Nkrumah coup set a trend.
Okay.
People could see that, it was not too difficult to overthrow a government. But the thing is, the military is organized in such a way that it should not be involved in politics. Because only a very few people can decide matters that affect everybody. We are how many here? 6. If we decide to take over the country, maybe you know a little bit about economics, he knows a little bit about health, and she knows a little bit about education. But we are not capable
of taking decisions for the entire country.
Of making policies that everybody, the whole 30 million of us, should follow. And so there are contradictions. And also, once they become the government, then they begin to fight among themselves.
Okay.
When Ankara had overthrown, and the others had overthrown Nkrumah, there was a counter coup in April 1967, led by a Lieutenant Alpha. And a lot of people were killed, including Kutuka, the one who led the anti-Nkrumah coup. And so, anytime you do something to annoy the army, they take over power, and they can't do better because they are not equipped to rule a country successfully.
Okay.
Even a man like Rawlings, because there was a lot of hunger and anger in the country, he was popular for some time. But after a while, he became unpopular. Because, for instance, some soldiers who don't understand politics, she sees this lady wearing a nice dress, and he wants one for his girlfriend. When he goes to a boutique shop and asks, what is the price of this dress? And they say 75 cedis, because maybe they ordered it from Lome, it should cost 50 cedis. But they are saying it's 75 cedis. Then he gets angry and he goes and arrests the lady who is selling that. How can you control prices at a boutique? But if they don't understand it, they will do it.
On February 24th, Ankara overthrew Nkrumah.
Ankara was actually not in the original group.
Okay.
But because he was a respected army general who had retired,
okay.
I think Nkrumah had retired him. His people wanted somebody who could, they thought, lead them with his experience. And so they went for him to become head of state.
Okay.
Yes.
How was the governance system like? You mentioned that soldiers don't have any business to do with politics. What were some of the things they also did wrong?
Well, to begin with, the Preventive Detention Act, which everybody condemned, was replaced with a Protective Custody Act.
Okay.
It's just the name that changed. They too could come and pick you up and put you in jail for as long as they liked. So just see the contradiction. And there were a whole lot of other things. In fact, the government was basically being run by civil servants.
Okay.
With armed people at the top. Now, civil servants are supposed to be civil servants, obey a policy laid down by elected people. If they themselves are making the policy and at the same time trying to implement it, just imagine what will happen. If they make mistakes, they cover it up. So, military rule is not good. It's very, very harmful to a country's development.
Okay. Now, in '72, we had General Kutwe Champon coming on board as he overthrew Buzier's government. What can you also say about that reign? Again,
there was a lot of discomfort about some of Dr. Buzier's policies, especially when he devalued the cedi by 43% in 1972. But he had trouble with the IMF and they were on his back, and the Western countries were pressing him to pay Ghana's debts, and we didn't have the resources. That's why the devaluation came. He thought it could help to stabilize the situation, but it made it worse. So Champon took advantage of that to overthrow him. And as I have said, you get economic policies, they begin to work, but because of the systemic failures in military rule, they couldn't succeed.
There's something people always credit a Champon with, and that is Operation Feed Yourself.
Yes.
Many said that policy was very good and it went down very well in there.
Yes. That was not the only policy.
Okay, what were some?
There were other aspects of self-reliance that he wanted to introduce into the country. He said we should cut our coat according to our cloth and so on. But the point is, because military rule is basically a rule by a small group, if you knew him, you went to him and you got an import license to bring something from wherever, and you could sell and make money. If I went to him for the same import license, even though my project might be better than yours, because he knows you, it is you who will get the import license. And eventually it became very widespread. And people thought that the military men were giving import licenses to their girlfriends.
Okay.
And there was a very lewd allegation that it was a regime of Fautobeji. I don't know whether
Can you throw some more light on that era?
It means come and see me in the dark and then you will get the import license.
Okay. You are watching People and Places here on GhanaWeb TV. The conversation has been interesting and very insightful, but I want you to stay for a part 2 of our conversation with Mr. Cameron Duodu. My name is Partey Narh. Thank you for watching.